before we dive into the discussion, we always like to recap each episode. So if you're new to us, we take that recap, cut it out of our podcast, and rehost it separately for your refreshing convenience. So if you happen to find yourself on that video, check down in the description box if you're interested in seeing the full podcast where we discuss and theory craft and everything. But yeah, without further ado, we can launch into this if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, so episode 24, we don't have a title yet, but episode 24 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role. So remember where we ended the last episode, which is Laudna and Imogen on the deck of the ship, and Laudna destroying Imogen's pet rock. Very tough scene to watch. Very good scene, though. And basically, this episode opens up with the next morning, or an early morning. And Orem is basically, he's one of the early risers of the group. He gets out on the deck of this airship, and he's kind of looking over the landscape, and he sees this small caravan kind of making its way, what seems to be towards Bassaras. And then he sees this rumble of earth a ways away from them. The best way I can describe it is like the movie Tremors. Like they see the ground sort of like splitting and cracking in like a moving way towards this caravan. And Orem is basically like, there's something down there and it's heading towards this small caravan of presumably defenseless, helpless people. So he gets Xandis, he wakes basically everyone up and is like, what is that? What's going on? Everyone, let's get together. Like we might have some people we need to be helping. And Xandis is like, oh, that's a Dustra. They're rare to see them kind of out and about. This isn't a common thing to see, but basically says our plan is not going to be to fight it because they're kind of crazy, but to at least steer it away. And so the ship moves down towards the surface, and everybody basically jumps in to help out this caravan. So Chetney and Fern jump on the harpoon guns and fire their harpoons into the Dustra. And they can see it's about 50 to 80 feet long. And it is, the best way to describe it is it's like this, I think Matt describes it as like a cephalopod with like spines and like spikes. And he actually gives a longer description of what it looks like under the earth, which we'll come back to in a second. But essentially they fire these chains into it. Fern actually aims for its tail, so to speak. And Matt's like, pretty much like, you're not going to make this shot. But then she rolls a 20 and beats his 18 DC check and is like, yeah, you really just kind of were firing blindly and somehow you hit it. So congrats. But basically they at least hit it with the harpoons. Imogen uses her command spell again and casts and says stop to it, and it stops sort of like lurching in the dirt and just sort of holds its position for a moment. She casts fly, she goes down, basically tries to detect thoughts, and basically, I don't know if she actually deliberately detected thoughts, but she realizes there's like an intelligence to this creature, that it at least understood her command stop, and that there's this sort of agony and this pain on the creature, and this anger, this desperation. So she goes back to the ship and basically says like, hey, I don't think we should like hurt it. There's something else happening here.
Yeah.
So FCG then actually does cast Speak with Animals and is like, hey, buddy, you okay? And this creature in like this low rumbling voice basically says that its children have been taken and it wants its children back, and seems to imply that this caravan has taken its children. Meanwhile, Chetney is gearing up his harpoon to make another shot at it. And FCG is like, wait, let me just convince it to leave. And is like, we can promise you the caravan doesn't have your spawn. Just leave and don't hurt anyone else. So he has to roll a persuasion check, and he rolls a natural 1. So Xandis is like, fire. And so Chetney fires into it again, and now it has 3 chains into it. And basically all negotiations are over. The ship ends up lifting the creature out of the dirt, and it ends up being this squid-like creature with all these tentacles, and at the ends of the tentacles are, Matt describes them as hands, like little fingers that are grabbing onto the dirt to try to like stay in the ground.
No.
As well as a third eye like down on the chest of the creature. But they basically carry it a ways away and basically drop it off, and it makes its way away. And then all of a sudden the party's like, wait a second, what if this caravan actually did steal their children? Like maybe we just did the wrong thing. So they decide, let's get some rest, and then let's go down and we'll talk to the caravan and kind of see what's going on. Ashton, by the way, in this whole process has been impaled by a spike on the ship. So they have to pull that out of him. He ends up being okay, though. And the party basically goes down to the caravan and find out that these are like really basically destitute traders. They don't have much. They're grateful for being saved, but they basically give, I think, Laudna like, hey, we did a tip jar and someone donated a wet blanket and like a few copper pieces. And they're like, oh, thank you. So Laudna takes the blanket. They give the copper to FCG. And then the party essentially continues on to Bosseros. And Bosseros itself is this junky, it's like junket. It's this junky smorgasbord. Smorgasbord of metal and scrap and tents, and it's all sitting on against this plateau against this large red stone wall. The airship lands in. And Xanus is basically like, all right, get off. Like, I don't want to be here any longer than I have to. So basically kicks them off. They get off. These guys ride out that Ashton identifies as the Skids. And Matt basically says, if you've seen Mad Max, it's basically like what these people look like. So they roll out, and basically, I think he said they had tattoos on their elbows. I don't remember what the tattoos were, though. Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head. I'll see if I can find it.
So they have tattoos that kind of identify them that are on their elbows. And one guy's kind of like, what the heck are you guys doing? That's quite the entrance. And even says that like this person in particular hasn't even seen an airship in 15 years. Kind of implies like you guys must be important. And Ashton immediately is kind of speaking for the group, kind of like, sort of trying to divert any kind of attention, like, oh, that's my first time on it. And they have this small conversation where Ashton identifies himself as Ashton Greymore. And the guy says, Greymore from the house? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, huh, okay. But basically says, like, kind of welcomes him into the city and says, if you make a mess, clean it up, like, don't do anything dumb. And then they basically go on their way. Not before Ashton, though, asks if Death Wish is still a thing. And the guy's like, all the time, baby. He basically is like, yeah, it's common. But again, we don't get any insight as to what this could be.
Right.
Party makes their way in. And I forgot to mention there was like this green light that sets on them, kind of like a watchtower that, sets on anyone who enters the city. And he called it something, but I don't remember what exactly it was. But all that to say, the party makes their
glow.
The Todic glow. Yeah, thank you. The party makes their way into the town, and they decide, yeah, let's get some food, get some rest. And Matt also explains that in this town, it's not common to find like a sleeping quarter. They're not like taverns where like you go to sleep and there's also like a bar. Here, in Bosseros, I think he calls it a caravanserai, and says basically, imagine if there was a place to sleep that also had a shopping mall.
Yeah.
And that's really like the culture of like the sleeping places here. So Ashton recommends they go to the Rahadin, which is kind of like a middle level type place. And the party basically gets a room, they get some food, and they go to sleep for the night. At night, each person's taking turns taking watch. They hear different people outside. What's interesting is during FCG's watch, he hears some birds shuffling outside the window. And oddly enough, wakes up Chetney in sort of a panic, saying that, and has Chetney look out the window and basically says, like, do you see a hawk out there? And he's like, yeah, I see a hawk. He's like, is it mangy? He's like, I don't know. It looks like a hawk. And FGG basically reveals that it was weird that there is this hawk that has tormented him and followed him for at length and is always basically tracking him and basically trying to poop on him too. So they have quite the interaction there. They also, at some point, they look at the tracker that Estros had given them, and it has this bright blue glow, and it seems to point to the south. And it's presumed that Armand Tresci is somewhere near. And Ashton even says, yeah, I think he's in like the southern, maybe it was the southern dregs. The southern dregs. Ashton basically says, yeah, he's probably in the southern dregs. There's not a lot down there that's worth seeing. There is the Taste of Taldore, which is like a really trashy, eclectic buffet of all cultures and whatever. They're like, all right, we'll head there in the morning, like when we're all rested. So, all that to say, they all set out in the morning to go that way. And as they're passing an alleyway, they hear some ruffians that are basically ordering a woman to drop her sword and leave. And they're like, that's someone who seems like they need help. So they rush in and we go to break. So you want to take it from there?
Yeah. So this elvish stranger that's being attacked, they actually have a guest come in, and it is Erika Ishii. So they join the table, and basically the bake picks up and initiative is rolled and combat begins. So we've got Bell's Hells, this elven stranger at this point, played by Erika, and basically a bunch of thugs. And as always, don't want to get slogged down in the exact play-by-play of everything that happened. So a few of the highlights that happen here are, first of all, these thugs are seemingly mugging this elf, and they're making attacks, and the elf suddenly thunderclaps, I want to say. I don't know if that's the exact spell, but teleports up to a nearby roof. But they're not running away. They're just kind of getting out of harm's way and still here to help. Imogen, during the battle, twin spells a mind whip and decides to roll on the wild magic table with her little Feywild stone that she has. Yeah. And because of this, all of her hair falls out.
Yeah.
So Chetney immediately tosses her his hat. She puts that on.
She's a total cue ball. That's what
that describes. She's very disturbed by it, I think, as well.
That's funny.
So, combat's continuing. Another kind of big moment was there's a spellcaster amongst these thugs, and at one point they cast what we come to find out is a spell called Phantasmal Killer, and basically they summon out of the sky this dark shadow form of Ashton, like if you played Ocarina of Time, Shadow Link, it was like Shadow Ashton, plummets down from the sky, has their own hammer, and basically just starts coming for the real Ashton. And even though Ashton, the real one, is raging, he still is frightened, which this is really terrifying to Ashton. And I think Matt describes it as you're not familiar with these gifts, and maybe the bill's coming due type of thing. So this really is unsettling. Combat continues. One of the, I think it's the leader, at one point tries to take Ashton's hammer from him, but fails. And in response to this, Taliesin hyper rages, which we don't really get any information on what exactly that means, but definitely is kind of just a new bag of tricks that he's revealing to us here. And he does that and takes a few strikes on the leader. And at this point in the combat, the thugs are realizing that they're in over their heads, and they basically start making moves to retreat. But as that happens, this dark Ashton grabs real Ashton's head and does a ton of psychic damage.
That's 30 something. It was crazy.
And so Ashton at this point is just looking real rough. Like I said, is terrified mechanically, I believe. So it's just not in a good place. So at this point, Imogen lines up a lightning bolt and kind of strikes 3 of the thugs that are making their way to retreat, and completely just obliterates 2 of them, getting a "how do you want to do this" on them. And she describes the lightning bolt literally impaling through them, and she sees the 3rd one through the holes in the other 2. And I think she uses her bonus action to telepathically communicate to that 3rd one that's you're not gonna get away, I'll find you. So Imogen going super hardcore. But combat is winding down. But one other cool thing that happens is Orem takes a moment on his turn, and one of a different thug, not one of the ones that Imogen just obliterated, but one that he had knocked unconscious earlier. He actually druid crafts and stabilizes their wound before then getting up, running over to that third one that did get away and knocking that one unconscious as well. So the party has fully dealt with all of these thugs now, and this elven stranger jumps down from the roof, but Erica rolls really poorly on the athletics check and like totally busts ass on the way down.
Yeah, I think she's like, I'm usually a really talented warrior, and then that's what
I'm
happens.
very capable.
Yeah.
But then introduces themselves as Dusk, and they're not from around here, and things are really fuzzy in their memory. The last thing they do remember is that they were in the Feywild, and it was this beautiful glen with a river, and like I believe it was dusk, which is why that's where they got their name from. And everything else is just fuzzy. So the party goes around introducing themselves. Everyone except Fern, who has actually made her way inside a nearby tent, just kind of seeing what's going on in there. And inside there's this unique strong smell, and an old woman that Matt described as like having a single tooth and like cataract eyes, and she's holding this bowl. And Fern asks like, is this your home? And the woman says, no, just, having lunch in here. And Fern asks, well, what are you eating? And she's like, well, I already ate. I'm having my after lunch. And as she says that, she kind of presents the bowl forward, and there's like these crystallized nuggets in there, and it's like smoking kind of like an incense. And Fern basically takes a big whiff, and Matt has her roll a wisdom saving throw, which she rolls a 21, I think. And he describes like the shadows in the room kind of start dancing a bit, and the old woman's face de-ages, and she's basically just kind of feeling a little tripped out. But because of her experience in the Feywild and with way crazier stuff, it doesn't really affect her. She can kind of shake out of it. And she's like, okay, well, I just came to get my sword. And she picks up a sword that is not hers, and it's like, great. And she's like, what else did I leave in here? And she ultimately also takes a box of candles, some blue pants, and one other thing, a bag of rice.
I forgot to mention her giving Xandus a hug too earlier.
Oh yeah,
like, you're a great guy, and then stealing from him too.
She can't help herself.
No.
So she takes those things, and she does ask what the old woman's name is, but the old woman, who's clearly like high on whatever it is that this smoking bowl is producing, and she's like, I think it starts with a D, but like I don't remember. And
sounds like a bowl in here.
And she's just like, passing my time here in hell. And Fern's like, okay, well, see you later. And basically exits the tent. And
that part too, she's like, oh, and she's like, because of the Hellcatch Valley, and she's like, oh, right, that's not as creepy then.
So she makes her way out, and now Fern too is introduced to Dusk, and Dusk, they basically make the Feywild connection, since that's the one thing Dusk remembers. And Fern, they like super connect on this. And Fern even wonders if this glen that Dusk is describing may very well be one that she is also familiar with, near where she and her grandmother lived. They're not certain that is the case, but they basically just kind of have a moment over it, and both say that they hope they can return there at some point. So now that everyone's met, the not two groups, Bells, Hells, and Dusk do decide to kind of roll together for now. And they're actually going to head to the Taste of Tal'Dorei just to get some food and actually kind of rest. Especially Ashton is like, I need a minute. So they're like, all right, well, let's head there. And that's actually where the episode ends.
Great job.
Yeah. I think that was everything.
So,
yeah.
Well, hey, if you're checking out our recap, click the link below, get the full episode, our thoughts and reactions to it. And if you're on our longer video, hey, thanks for checking out the whole video.
Yes.
So